Welcome to our Asia Pacific Ambassador Conversations series. Today, our conversation is with His Excellency Jon Lambe, UK Ambassador to ASEAN. Now, Your Excellency, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to join you.
Now, for a start, your position as UK Ambassador to ASEAN has only been around since 2019. Tell us about this and how this came about.
Well, thank you. So I'd say my position is really part of a step change, really, in the UK's engagement with ASEAN, but also with the Indo-Pacific region as a whole. And it was one of a number of posts that was created at the same time. It followed, our departure from the European Union. It was kind of a recognition that as an independent foreign policy actor, the UK needed to be even more present. We already had one of the biggest international diplomatic networks. It needed to be even bigger and even more engaged. And for this part of the world, ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific, it's a huge priority for the government. And I know we'll come on and talk about that. So opening the mission to ASEAN was seen as a really important step. The decision was first taken by our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, when he was the Foreign Secretary. And as you said, I started at the end of 2019.
And how do you then work together with your colleagues, your ambassador colleagues in the region? Because obviously there must be, where is the overlap and where are things that are specific to you?
Yeah, so the UK, I'm really proud of the fact that the UK already had embassies and high commissions in all 10 of ASEAN's member states. So we had a fantastic platform of cooperation and dialogue with the countries of the region. So when I arrived, I had this, fantastic foundation, a fantastic network of colleagues that I work with. My focus is working with ASEAN, the institution, the organization based here in Jakarta, and their focus is working with the countries. But of course, there's a huge amount of overlap there because ASEAN runs by consensus and it's kind of owned and run by its member states. So to engage with the institution, you have to engage with the member states and vice versa. I mentioned earlier, but I'm actually traveling to Cambodia, Singapore, and the Philippines, which will give me the chance to see my colleagues and also to talk to the governments and the think tanks and civil societies in each of those countries as well.
Now, in 2022, Your Excellency, what is your government's priority in terms of its engagement with ASEAN?
So right now, we're still incredibly pleased and happy and proud and grateful to ASEAN for accepting the UK as ASEAN's 11th dialogue partner. So that decision was taken last year. And so right now, our priority is really putting the framework into place and for all of the next steps. So as a dialogue partner, making sure we've agreed with ASEAN what we're going to use that partnership for, making sure that we're really ready to bring in the whole of the kind of UK business sector, government sector, and other sectors in to support that. And also kind of looking back to the UK, the reason why we're so interested in the region is there's so much opportunity here, economic opportunity, foreign policy opportunity. So there's great things that the UK can do here. And I'll be talking about that with businesses from the UK, with my colleagues back in the UK, to really, improve and increase the flow of interest from the UK in this region.
Now, I want to zoom in a little bit on defense cooperation and defense matters in the region, because there you can see a significant shift in the UK in terms of its actions. Now, what does the UK see its role in the South China Sea? And particularly, a big change has been the force projection by the aircraft carrier Queen Elizabeth recently. So
there's kind of two issues there, really. So I'd say on the South China Sea, the first and most important thing to flag is that the UK doesn't take a position on the territorial disputes there. As you know, there's a series of overlapping claims and counterclaims for various features and things like that in the South China Sea. We don't take a position on those, but what we do think very strongly is that those claims and counterclaims should all be resolved in accordance with international law, and most importantly, with the UN Convention Law on the Sea, UNCLOS, as a core component of that international law. And as the UK, we're really proud of the fact that we host the International Maritime Organization in London. We have, thanks to our kind of island status, We have a really, strong understanding of maritime law, lots of expertise in the UK there, and so that's our core principle. And of course, that's strongly supported by ASEAN countries, which is fantastic, and that's how we engage in the South China Sea. The Carrier Strike Group, I mean, that was really a great demonstration, a multinational demonstration, firstly of the UK's, some of our newest and most impressive defence capabilities, but it's also all about cooperation. It's about trade, and that group, as it came through the ASEAN region on its way out and then back again to the UK, engaged with the vast majority of ASEAN member states. We took part in exercises. We helped build capacity. We helped build trade links as well. So I'd say that's a very consistent part of our engagement in this region. And again, I should flag that the UK has had an almost consistent naval presence in the Indo-Pacific for the past 2 years. So the Carrier Strike Group built on that, but it wasn't, it built on strong foundations.
So traditionally, when you talk about defense cooperation in the region, you think of the five-power defense agreement. How has that, obviously, recent developments have shown that relationship has now evolved. How has it evolved specifically between some of your long-term partners within the five-power defense agreement?
Yeah, so I'm glad you raised it, because I think not everyone is as aware of that as I think they should be, because it's a fantastic agreement, arrangement. It's been in place now for 50 years. It just celebrated its 50th anniversary, and I think it's a great example of an Indo-Pacific defense, a multilateral defense treaty in the Indo-Pacific. But of course, in this region, it includes 2 of ASEAN member states, which is great. But there's of course 10 in the region. So for us, it's a really important arrangement that we're extremely committed to, really proud of. But it's not the totality of our engagement. ASEAN itself has a number of different forums that we're also engaging with. Our Defense Secretary was a guest at the ADMM Plus meeting in 2020, which was the first time that's ever happened. We have a lot of bilateral defense engagement with all of the ASEAN member states. And we're thinking about new ways that we could bolster that. Before my mission opened, in fact, we created a regional defense staff that's based in Singapore that opened in 2016. So it shows that our kind of defense engagement in this region again has a long history.
Now, Ambassador, how do you see the war in Ukraine and what to many of us looks like a realignment of the world order, not only politically, but economically? How do you see that impacting relations between the UK and ASEAN?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first and most obvious thing to say is it's an incredible tragedy, really, as we see, a completely unprovoked war of aggression against a neighbor who has done nothing wrong, in contravention of all international law, all of the kind of agreements that we've all collectively signed up to. And to see that being done by a permanent member of the Security Council, I think makes it even worse. So, and of course, now we're seeing, a huge humanitarian tragedy playing out as a result of that. And we're now seeing, of course, significant economic impacts as well, not just in the immediate region, but globally and affecting this region. So I think you're right to say that is a global shift. It's not just something that affects Europe. It's not just about European security. I mean, from a UK perspective, we are doing everything that we can to support Ukraine to defend itself. We're doing a lot to support the humanitarian crisis and to counteract those effects. But we are thinking about the global lessons as well. This shows for us just how important it is that we have a rules-based system that is, respected, where countries, big or small, sign up to the same rules and then obey them and don't invade their neighbors for no reason whatsoever, don't inflict humanitarian tragedy for no reason whatsoever. And it's clear, as we've seen just yesterday in another vote at the UN, that the vast majority of the world feels the same way, and that Russia is incredibly isolated after its invasion. So I think for us, those are the key lessons. We need to double down on respect for international law. We need to double down on the mechanisms that can make sure that big and small countries both can work together and don't need to fear that a powerful neighbor will invade them for no reason.
Now, Your Excellency, let's move away from diplomacy and defense and talk about really dollars and cents, the trade relationship with ASEAN. What does the trade picture look like and the balance of trade?
Yeah, so this is, again, something where, we're really pleased and proud of the fact that the UK's trade with ASEAN has been growing steadily and strongly. We're a top 10 investor in the region. Our trade from the UK to ASEAN grew by 45% between 2010 and 2019. And to give you an idea of what that means in dollar cents, or I would say pounds and pence, in the 4 quarters to the end of Q3 of 2021, that meant our trade was £36.2 billion with the region. So that is great. We are really pleased about that. But of course, we are enthusiastic and ambitious for that to grow a lot further. And that's exactly the same message that we get from our ASEAN friends and partners. And I think that's one of the things where obviously all these trade figures and the trade situation took a serious knock in the pandemic. But this is something where the kind of rebound is happening fast. The rebound in ASEAN is strong, and there's just enormous potential. So I think it's an area of the world that UK businesses and the UK government is really excited about. And of course, there's lots going the other way as well. We see a lot of investment from ASEAN countries and from ASEAN businesses back into the UK too. So a big part of my role and a big part of my mission's job is to see where we can go further with all of that.
And so which are the biggest trading partners in the region?
For the UK?
Yes.
Yeah, so the biggest one for us is Singapore, which partly reflects Singapore's role as a hub for the region. So I think something like 50% of our exports to Singapore get re-exported to the ASEAN region. And of course, also reflects the kind of strength of the UK's economy in services and Singapore's role as a hub for services as well. And then after that, I think it's broadly consistent with the sizes of the economies in the region. But we've got really good prospects, and we've seen great growth actually in all markets of the region, with the sad exception, of course, of Myanmar, where the coup and the economic impacts of the coup have, of course, have put a lot of the economic progress that Myanmar had made has gone into reverse, unfortunately.
And where does the UK see opportunities to attract ASEAN businesses to invest in the UK?
So this is something that we're working on. I think at the moment, last year, I think we had £9 billion of investment from ASEAN into the UK, and it's an interesting one. There's a mix. There's a mix of sectors. I would say it's not dominated by any one sector, but we see investments in real estate. We see a lot of exports from, consistent with where a lot of ASEAN's manufacturing strengths are. So textiles, food and beverages, lots of those kinds of exports going to the UK. There's kind of an interestingly long list of UK football clubs that are owned by ASEAN yes. companies and individuals, which is fantastic as well. Some of them very high profile, including the Premiership winners and things like that. So that's great, but I don't think it's enough. I don't think I would call it a sector that is an investment sector in its own right from ASEAN, but something that I can't help noticing.
Now, I wanted to shed some light on how the UK engages ASEAN from a cultural and arts perspective, because there, as you mentioned earlier in the interview, we have a lot of strong ties that go back decades with the UK. Yeah.
So, and this is an interesting one, because I think the UK arts and culture sector itself is so vibrant, that it's an interesting one where the government, we have a role in government, but actually this is a sector that also does so much without the government being closely involved. And we talked just now about football. I think that's one of the things that I would put in this sector as well. And similarly, we're seeing in the other direction, arts and culture from ASEAN are also becoming more visible, I would say, in the UK too. Thinking a bit about it from a government perspective, we have the British Council, which is a fantastic organisation partly funded by the UK government with a really strong focus on arts, culture, and education. They do brilliant work in this region. And it's something where now, as a dialogue partner, I mentioned we're looking at our next steps with ASEAN. And this is something that we'll be looking at. We're looking at agreeing with ASEAN how we're going to cooperate together for the next 5 years. And I'm expecting arts and culture, including maybe the economic aspects of arts and culture, to be part of that conversation.
Ambassador, could you shed some light in terms of some key potential developments, maybe events and visits to watch out for in ASEAN over the next 12 months?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping, we were talking about the fact that travel is reopening. I'm hoping we're going to see even more. It's one of the things that's been fantastic from my perspective is even with the challenges of the pandemic, we've had a really regular flow of senior visitors from the UK government to the region over the past 2 years. So I've had 2 visits from the foreign secretaries here in Jakarta. We've had many of our ministers visiting other countries as well. Just a couple of weeks ago, our trade secretary was here in Jakarta and meeting with ASEAN to talk about next steps in our economic relationship. So I'm expecting to see that kind of rhythm continuing. From a UK perspective, one thing we're really excited about is, in our first year as a dialogue partner, we'll be joining ASEAN's big set piece meetings for the first time. So that means a foreign ministers meeting in Cambodia at the beginning of August, and then an economic ministers meeting in September. And of course, running through all of this year, G20, Indonesia is the president of the G20 this year. I'm sitting here in Jakarta at the moment with G20 banners everywhere and a constant flow of senior visitors from all the G20 countries, which is fantastic. So it's going to be a great year, actually, particularly on the economic side here in Indonesia and in ASEAN.
Now, Your Excellency, it's been an enlightening conversation, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. But before we end this interview, are there any final words you'd like to leave us with?
Well, thank you. I mean, for me, you mentioned earlier on the kind of UK's tilt to the Indo-Pacific, which was published as part of our integrated review last year. But I sit here sometimes and I think, my team and I were a kind of physical embodiment of that. We're evidence that it's happened. But we're only a first step. So I think the main message I would leave you with is that I'm expecting, even more to happen over the next year, the next 2 years. I'm really excited about that, and I hope that you and your viewers will see all kinds of new initiatives and new engagement from the UK in the region.
Now, Ambassador, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Well, thank you again for inviting me. It's a real pleasure.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to His Excellency Jon Lambe, UK Ambassador to ASEAN, on Biztech's Asia Pacific Ambassador Conversations series. This video and podcast will be in our social media platforms as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.